Hey guys, tonight we're gliding back to a world of powdered wigs, velvet slippers, and golden forks, not to wage war or lead revolutions, but to observe something far more peculiar, the way French aristocrats once tiptoed around dinner plates like they were minefields. Picture yourself walking into a candlelit dining hall at Versailles. Everything glows in shades of cream and gold. Perfumed air clings to your nose like a powder puff. Laughter tinkles like glassware. And yet, tension brews beneath the silk. You're not just here for the food, you're here to survive it. Because in this world, eating is dangerous business. Every bite could be your last. That roast quail. It smells divine, but it could be laced with arsenic. The fig's delicious, until someone reminds you that belladonna hides well in jam. Nobles in this era aren't fretting about peasant uprisings, they're glancing nervously at the soup. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit at the edge of a long table linen, so starched it could stand on its own. Silver dishes gleam like tiny mirrors, reflecting rows of delicate fingers and trembling hands. Servants glide by with crystal decanters and suspicious smiles. The Marquis beside you, he's pretending to be relaxed, but he's only picking at his food-moving peas like chess pieces. You aren't surprised. Rumors have been swirling like taffeta skirts, a baron's sudden collapse after a spoonful of bisque, a duchess whose tea turned out to be enhanced with nightshade, and of course, the scandalous Count de Something or Other whose chocolates turned blue in the middle of a ball. Historians still argue whether any of these aristocratic deaths were truly poisonings or just indigestion exaggerated by panic, but the fear was real. This wasn't just Versailles drama. The threat of poison was a constant humming presence. It crept between courses, danced behind fans, and fluttered down from every chandelier. And so naturally, elaborate etiquette emerged, more a defense strategy than a dining custom. Napkins folded just so silverware placed in precisely the right configuration. You do know that touching the wrong fork first was basically a culinary declaration of war, right? If someone offered you a fig tart too eagerly, you declined with a vague comment about your digestion and avoided eye contact for the rest of the evening. The irony, of course, is that while they worried endlessly about exotic poisons slipping into their duck confit, they paid little mind to the slow killers on every table, lead-based glazes, mercury-laced beauty powders, or just an absurd amount of butter. But none of that felt dramatic enough. Poison, you see, had flair. It had narrative. It gave aristocrats the exquisite thrill of feeling important. If someone's trying to kill me, surely I must matter. And yet, as you scan the dessert platters, something else catches your eye. It isn't deadly, but it might be worse. Because sitting on a silver tray like it owns the room is a spiky, golden, overly confident pineapple. It glistens beneath a dome of glass, looking entirely out of place among the cream-filled pastries and spun sugar sculptures. The murmurs begin immediately. A pineapple. Here. At a spring supper, who brought it? Did they grow it themselves? How tropical. You lean forward, inspecting it like a rare jewel. The fruit is not sliced. It is not served. It simply is. Like a crown or an accusation. The countess across the table makes a noise that might be a gasp or a hiccup. It's hard to tell. Someone else leans in to whisper that they heard the Duc d'Aumale paid 30 livres just to borrow one for an hour last week. 30 livres. You do some quick mental math, it's roughly a month's wages for a servant or a quarter of a miniature horse. And yet here it is, just sitting. No one touches it. Not yet. No one dares. Because everyone here has heard the rumors pineapples can cause spontaneous illness, wild dreams, sweating. A single bite might incite fever or inflame the passions, or so says Madame Legrand, who once claimed she hallucinated her late husband's ghost after sniffing a pineapple tart. But even those who don't believe the stories are still hesitant. The fruit is foreign. Too foreign. Imported from far-off colonies where the air is hot, the laws are loose, and the pineapples apparently grow with abandon. Back in France, the climate mocks every attempt to cultivate them. They're grown in heated glasshouses called pineries, but success is rare. Each fruit takes 2 to 3 years to grow, and sometimes the plants simply give up and die of ennui, much like their aristocratic caretakers. Still, possession of one, even briefly, is a social triumph. Never mind that it might be toxic. Never mind that it could erupt in spores, it won't. But that's not the point. The pineapple has become the ultimate status symbol. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a servant clears his throat and mutters that he saw the pineapple arrive under guard. A small procession. A velvet pillow. You believe him. In this era, even the fruit travels better than most humans. You glance again at the noble beside you. He's sweating now, but not from heat. No, it's the combination of fear and envy. He wanted to bring the pineapple, but someone beat him to it. Dinner resumes awkwardly. Someone tries to change the subject. Someone else fails. And throughout it all, the pineapple sits smug and untouched, quietly, reminding every guest that in Versailles, even the fruit might be deadlier than the wine. You rise with the others as the servants sweep away the last of the silver dishes still gleaming despite being mostly untouched. The pineapple, of course, remains on its pedestal. It's been moved to a central display table now under a fresh bell jar. No one wants to be caught staring, but everyone glances sideways at it like they're trying to remember whether it's friend or foe. Later that evening, you find yourself wandering through the salons of Versailles, each room filled with laughter card games and the unmistakable rustle of silk. But tonight, conversation keeps drifting back to that fruit. No one quite understands it. No one wants to be left out of the obsession either. You pause at a window where two powdered gentlemen are in heated discussion. Not about politics, war, or taxes, what are those, but about pineapples. One swears they've originated in India, the other insists on Brazil. Neither has ever been to either place, but that's irrelevant. In court, certainty is more fashionable than accuracy. Historians still argue whether the first pineapple to grace French nobility came via Portugal or through Caribbean colonies, but most agree that by the late 1600s, the fruit had achieved legendary status in the eyes of European elites. It wasn't just that it was rare, it was unthinkably rare. And yet here it was infiltrating France's most lavish gatherings like an edible interloper. You trail behind a cluster of noblewomen heading toward the conservatory, where rumors say another pineapple is being kept alive in a specially heated pot. Heated, with actual firewood. You'd expect this kind of attention for a royal baby, maybe. But for a fruit A servant opens the glass door, and warm air spills out. Inside, a single plant leaves jagged like a crown, the tiniest bulb of a pineapple peeking from its center. The Countess de Rochefort claps her hands with delight. It's growing. She trills, though the thing hasn't changed since Tuesday. You suppress a chuckle. Across the room, a footman quietly fans the pineapple to keep it cool. Someone else is misting it with rose water. You want to ask if it's about to give a performance. As you watch the plant bask under its sun lamp, you begin to grasp the full extent of the aristocracy's fascination. This wasn't just about luxury or novelty. It was about control. To bring a tropical fruit into a cold, controlled environment and coax it into ripening, that was the magic. It was a small, spiky rebellion against nature, a declaration that even the exotic must bow to French refinement. And so pineapples began to appear not just in kitchens, but in fashion and art. You pass a lady whose wig sports a gold-painted replica nestled among ostrich feathers. You see tapestries where cherubs frolic with pineapples as if they've known them all their little winged lives. At the portrait gallery, a young painter unveils a commissioned piece, a full-length depiction of the Marquise de Fontainebleau reclining on a fainting couch, holding a pineapple like a lover's hand. The fruit's detail is stunning. You half expect it to blink. Nearby, a tailor is taking measurements for a new waistcoat lined with pineapple motifs. Pineapples, not pineapple fabric. Tiny golden fruits embroidered around the collar like medals of absurd honor. You lean against the wall and let your gaze drift upward. The ceiling above you is painted with a pastoral scene, shepherds, nymphs, and yes, you guessed it, a pineapple centerpiece being admired by a goat. The symbolism is unclear. You choose not to overthink it. By now, you're starting to sense that no one really knows what pineapples taste like. They've become too sacred for consumption. In fact, a strange ritual has emerged. Nobles rent pineapples not to eat, but to display. You walk past a ledger listing these temporary rentals like prized works of art. One pineapple 2-hour salon display 18 livres. And yet when the moment comes, few dare to cut into the thing. There's the story of the Viscountess de Mireille, who did slice hers open only to be met with scandalized gasps from her guests. One fainted, another left in a huff. Someone murmured, "Barbarian." It's said her social standing never fully recovered, which is just as well because no one actually likes the taste. At least not enough to risk social exile. You overhear one footman muttering that it's a bit like chewing on perfume. Another swears the texture reminds him of wet straw. Still, no one says these things out loud. Not in earshot of the Marquis de Clermont, whose family coat of arms was recently updated to include, yes, a pineapple. It's all quite silly. But then again, that's Versailles, a place where opulence outpaces logic at every turn, where status is measured not in land or lineage, but in how convincingly you can pretend to enjoy the smell of something you wouldn't dare eat. As you retreat to the quieter corridors, you notice something strange, a guard posted at the Pineapple Conservatory. When you ask why, he shrugs and whispers, "Last week someone tried to lick it." You don't ask further. It's late now. The palace settles into velvet darkness. Somewhere down the hall, music wafts from a harpsichord, sweet and slow. You catch a glimpse of candlelight flickering through keyholes and under doors. And in the center of it all, on silver trays in gilded portraits under glass domes, the pineapples remain untasted and triumphant. Morning comes gently, as it always does at Versailles, filtered through damask curtains, diffused by layers of lace and powdered dreams. You awaken to birdsong real or recorded, you're not quite sure. The scent of lavender water lingers faintly in the air, masking the underlying musk of 1,000 too rich perfumes. And as you stretch, you hear it again. Pineapple talk. Over breakfast, if you can call a ritualized 3-hour affair breakfast, a cluster of courtiers has already resumed last night's debate. Was the pineapple at last night's banquet real or a wax replica? You lean in eager for an answer that of course never comes. It doesn't matter. The question is more valuable than the fruit itself. Because now you're about to witness how the pineapple has mutated from rare fruit into something stranger, an object of aesthetic obsession. Today you follow the Countess de Pine to her private salon. She's preparing for a portrait sitting not of herself, mind you, but of a pineapple. You blink. Yes, the fruit has its own scheduled painting. The artist, a wide-eyed Flemish import, sets up his easel with the reverence of a man about to paint royalty. It will be remembered for centuries, he mutters, sketching the fruit's dramatic shadow. The Countess nods proudly. This one, she says, patting the pineapple like a lapdog, was grown in my cousin's piniere near Bordeaux, heated by composted swan feathers. Very reliable. You don't even flinch anymore. The session takes hours. There's debate over the angle of the fruit. Should it be posed stem forward or tilted slightly as if caught mid-glamour shot? Someone adds a miniature laurel wreath. Too Roman, the artist asks. The Countess shakes her head. Perfect. This is not satire. This is France in the 18th century. And the pineapple is no longer just a fruit. It is an icon. You venture next into the fashion wing, where a young modiste is fitting mannequins with gowns patterned entirely in pineapples. Golden thread glints in the shapes of spiny crowns, the fruit rendered more regal than any noble crest. You wonder how much of this is satire. Then, someone informs you that Queen Marie herself recently wore a pineapple-trimmed petticoat at an informal garden supper. You smile, because of course she did. One hallway over, you stumble into a room dedicated to pineapple china, porcelain plates painted with pineapples, teacups with pineapple stems for handles, chamber pots with tastefully arranged golden fruit on the lid. It seems the fruit has invaded every surface like ivy made of sugar and status. Historians still argue whether this pineapple mania was a conscious symbol of colonial power, Europe's way of owning and taming the exotic, or merely another decorative distraction in a culture already drowning in ornament. Possibly both. Versailles was good at multitasking that way. At a small table, an elderly nobleman named the Chevalier de la Garde waves you over. He wears a medallion shaped like a pineapple slice gold, of course. They're not just beautiful, he wheezes. They represent everything we long for. Danger, decay, desire. Then he sneezes loudly into a monogrammed handkerchief and spills tea on his lapel. You take your leave quietly. Next, a footman guides you down a narrow staircase to a room few nobles ever visit, the palace archives. Here, in soft candlelight, ledgers record pineapple-related transactions in meticulous ink, pages upon pages of names, locations, durations, and prices. You run your finger down a column. Borrowed for masquerade ball, 3 hours, 12 livres. Displayed at bedside during illness, 8 livres. Used as centerpiece for poetry reading not consumed, 15 livres. You pause at one entry that simply reads, pineapple acquired, admired, perished. A footnote adds, mold noted. No scandal ensued. Outside the archive room, you cross paths with a man carrying what appears to be a baby stroller, but upon closer inspection is a satin-lined cart designed to safely transport a single pineapple across the estate. He nods solemnly. For the Duchess. She prefers her fruit upright at all times. As you walk back toward the main hall, the late morning light glints off a mirrored wall, revealing your own reflection, dusted with a light shimmer of pineapple fever. There's a surreal comfort in it all. Versailles at this point seems less like a palace and more like a stage play trapped in an infinite loop. And the pineapple. It's no longer the guest star. It's the unwitting lead. You settle into a window seat overlooking the gardens. Someone has trimmed a topiary into the shape of, yes, naturally, a pineapple. A few noble women walk past it, umbrellas bobbing like swan necks offering reverent nods to the hedge. You wonder briefly how many of them have actually eaten a pineapple. 1. None. There's a tale circulating that a young viscount bit into a too ripe one and wept either from joy or indigestion. No one knows which. Another rumor claims someone carved an entire pineapple into a flute. The melody, they said, was haunting. Historians still debate whether that was literal or just the after effects of fermented fruit punch. You watch as a kitchen boy walks hurriedly past arms full of empty pineapple molds used for desserts that imitate the shape without risking the taste. Gelatins, sugar sculptures, butter pats. You nod to yourself. It makes sense. Simulate the pineapple. Don't become it. Because the real thing, it's too much, too sweet, too wild, too real. Better perhaps to keep it on its pedestal. Afternoon at Versailles unfolds like a well-rehearsed opera. The halls shimmer with reflected sunlight and conversations bloom in salons over warm chocolate and chilled suspicions. You trail behind a group of lesser nobles, those who orbit the inner circle but never quite touch it, gathered in a side chamber to gossip over the latest scandal. No one talks of politics. No one dares mention the food shortages outside the palace walls. But the pineapple that appeared at Madame de Vervin's supper last night, that is the topic. Did she serve it? One whispers, fanning herself with a peacock feather. No, darling. She displayed it next to the cheeses, uncut. A round of impressed sighs follows as if she tamed a tiger. You're beginning to understand the greatest luxury of the pineapple isn't its rarity, it's the restraint. The refusal to consume what others might not even see. To serve it would be gauche. To eat it would be practically criminal. And yet today something curious is happening. You're led through winding corridors to a secret kitchen salon, less gilded, more tiled and echoing with the occasional clang of copper pots. Here, behind closed doors, the king's chef is preparing a pineapple for consumption. You gasp a little. Yes, this one will be eaten. But not by just anyone. Word is the king himself is curious. The chef moves like a surgeon slicing off the thick skin, then sectioning the golden flesh with measured reverence. Each slice is placed on a crystal tray lined with violets. Steam rises not from the fruit, but from the anxiety in the room. Only the king, someone whispers behind you, has the guts to try it. You peek around the corner as a servant delivers the tray upstairs. Everyone watches and waits. It's a long wait, because you learn the pineapple will not be eaten directly. Instead, it will be presented alongside a tasting of candied violets, a sugar swan, and a spoonful of imported coconut milk. It's to be admired, perhaps sniffed, then perhaps sampled with the tip of a golden spoon. Historians still argue whether Louis XV ever actually swallowed the pineapple. Some say he took one polite bite and declared it bright. Others claim he merely passed it to a royal dog who sneezed once and refused a second nibble. One apocryphal account suggests it was smuggled out the back and re-rented to the Duchesse de Brionne for a poetry luncheon. Regardless, what matters is not the eating. It's the pageantry. Later that evening, you're invited to the Duchesse's quarters, where the same pineapple, now slightly browner, slightly slumped, sits once again under glass. It's already been repurposed as the centerpiece for a whispered discussion circle on tropical morals. You don't ask what that means. Someone suggests the pineapple represents the fragility of pleasure. Another says it's a metaphor for divine temptation. Someone else snorts into her wine and mutters, "It's just fruit." But it isn't, because the pineapple, for all its absurd elevation, has begun to absorb meaning. It's becoming a cultural mirror reflecting back all the hunger indulgence and quiet panic of the aristocracy. It's about now you notice the strange new ritual emerging nobles passing around sketchbooks filled with pineapple portraits. You flip through one finding pages of lovingly rendered fruits, some smiling, some crying, one reclining provocatively on a chaise lounge. A footnote reads, "Dedicated to the ripeness that passed too soon." You're not sure if this is satire. You're also not sure anyone else knows. There's even talk of a new poetic form, Lanina sonnet, dedicated to celebrating the fruit's tragic beauty. You hear one such poem recited at the conservatory, "O golden orb with dagger crown, you ripen slow and wear a frown. For those who dare to taste your flesh are judged unfit, their souls a mess." You clap softly. It seems rude not to. Across the garden path, a group of gentlemen is discussing a rather bold idea, pineapple perfume. It smells of the colonies, one says with a twitch. Sweet, but dangerous. Another suggests bottling the essence of pine in citrus oil and dabbing it on wig powder. The prototype causes 2 sneezes and an accidental marriage proposal. You stroll back through the orangery, reflecting on how completely the pineapple has penetrated the court's collective psyche. It has surpassed being an object of fascination. It has become a test of social finesse. To own one is impressive. To borrow one strategically is brilliant. To serve one is reckless. To write about one is tasteful. To eat one unforgivable. Unless you're the king. That night, as twilight dips Versailles into honeyed shadows, you find yourself near the kitchens again. There's hushed activity. A servant carefully wraps something in velvet. You catch a glimpse of pineapple, wilted yet still grand. He leans toward you. It's going to be re-sugared for tomorrow's breakfast. No one will know the difference. And he's probably right. Because in a world obsessed with appearances, even the fruit is allowed to fake it. You wake early the next morning, not because of the soft trill of bird song or the sun slipping past the lace curtains, but because of a rising murmur from the hall. Something's happened. A scandal, maybe. You pull on your embroidered dressing robe, pineapple, patterned naturally, and peek into the corridor. 2 maids whisper as they pass. You catch fragments, tasted it, without permission, collapsed. You raise an eyebrow. By the time you make it down to the salon, the gossip is already simmering into full boil. Apparently, the Baron d'Evron, young foppish and always just slightly behind the latest fashion, took it upon himself to slice a pineapple brought in for the morning's breakfast display. A grave misstep. It wasn't even his pineapple someone hisses, hand fluttering near her mouth like a trapped bird. It was on loan from the Maréchal's garden. Worse still, he didn't cut it properly. No ceremony, no audience. He just hacked it apart like it was a common apple and ate a chunk with his fingers. His fingers. You can almost hear the collective pearl-clutching echo through the marble walls. Now the poor Baron lies faint in his chambers. Food poisoning, someone suggests. Shame poisoning, corrects another. Historians still debate whether this collapse was a true medical incident or a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation by faking illness. Some say he turned green. Others claim he recited tropical poetry for hours before passing out cold. All agree on one thing: he was never quite invited anywhere fashionable again. You wander outside to clear your head and step directly into another conversation, this one about arsenic. Because while pineapples continue their theatrical reign over Versailles, the fear of poison has not for a moment diminished. If anything, it's only become more absurd. Today, the nobles are comparing recent food fads with their poison potential. Do you trust cardamom, one whispers. It disguises bitterness. What about those candied rose petals, absolutely deadly? I only eat them in odd numbers. You suppress a sigh. Eaten here is like chess, but with less logic and more lace. One gentleman, the Marquis de Vézelay, insists he's had all his silverware replaced with gold to counteract potential toxins. Poison reacts to metal, he explains solemnly. Gold is neutral. You nod politely while quietly wondering if gold forks also make your soup taste like coins. Down the path, a noblewoman in a chartreuse turban brandishes a sprig of parsley like a dagger. This neutralizes toxins, she tells anyone who'll listen. I chew a leaf between every course. You watch her pop one like a mint and try not to laugh. The fear of poisoning isn't new, of course. It dates back centuries. Popes employed tasters, emperors brewed antidotes, queens wore amulets filled with crushed emeralds. What's new is the style with which the French aristocracy approaches it, theatrical, obsessive, and often hilariously misinformed. You sit near a bubbling fountain and pull out a small leather-bound booklet. It's a gift from a local apothecary given with a wink and the words, "For your protection, monsieur." Inside is a list of suspected poison ingredients and their effects, all written in loopy script. Nightshade, eyes widen, then dim. Arsenic, sweet mouth, bitter end. Belladonna, beauty first, then stillness. You flip to the back and find a pineapple drawn with an ominous question mark. Beneath it, in tiny writing, effect unconfirmed. May induce social ruin. You chuckle softly. Later you pass through the royal kitchen gardens. The chef, a round-faced man with a terrifyingly calm manner, is instructing apprentices on how to store pineapples without bruising them. Handle it like you'd handle the queen's ankles, he warns. The apprentices nod with the gravity of soldiers preparing for battle. Nearby, a pile of discarded fruit, peels, apple, pear, even a few daring figs rests untouched. No pineapple scraps, of course. Nothing is wasted. Even the rind might be displayed. And still, despite all this careful pageantry, you hear it again, the whisper of poison. A new rumor has emerged. Someone no one will name names believes the pineapples themselves are being used to conceal toxic powders. The crown could be hollowed, one man says nervously. You fill it with arsenic, pass it to a rival, and the smell hides the bitterness. It's not true. Probably. But here, truth and drama often share the same chaise lounge. Historians still debate whether any such attempts ever occurred, but accounts of sudden illness following pineapple displays are littered through journals and letters. Of course, none of them name specific victims or outcomes, just enough detail to spark fear, which is precisely the point. That evening, you attend a modest dinner hosted by a mid-ranking viscountess who, perhaps sensing the fruit fatigue setting in, opts for pears instead. The relief in the room is tangible. People eat with real appetite for the first time in days. No guarded glances, no anxious sniffing. Until, of course, the final course arrives, a single pineapple slice perched on a gold-rimmed plate, soaking in honey and rosewater. A silence falls. The Viscountess raises her glass. For those brave enough to taste sweetness. You admire her flair. And then with theatrical calm, she takes the first bite. You count the seconds. 1, 2, 3. She smiles. The room breathes again. Someone claps. Dessert is saved. Reputation intact. But you don't eat your slice. You wrap it carefully in a silk napkin and slip it into your coat. You've got plans for that pineapple. Later that night, after the candles are snuffed and the footmen have vanished into the wallpaper like well-trained ghosts, you slip through the moonlit corridors of Versailles with the pineapple slice still tucked carefully in your coat pocket. It's damp now, honey-sticky and fragrant, and a little ridiculous. But you're committed. You're going to see what the fuss is really about. Not taste it, of course. That would be unseemly. You're going to test it. You head toward a lesser-used gallery, one where forgotten busts of vaguely important aristocrats collect dust and gloom. It's the perfect spot. You pull the slice from your pocket, place it on a marble plinth between two cracked portraits, and step back. Nothing happens. You wait a little longer. Still nothing except the faint rustle of silk as a draft plays with a curtain. You lean in and take a cautious sniff. Sweet. Sharp. With just a ghost of something. Fermented. You pull out a small mirror from your sleeve standard issue for anyone at court and inspect yourself. No new boils, no sudden swelling, no visible poisoning. For now, you consider giving it a nibble, just a corner. But then you remember the Baron d'Evran and his social death spiral, and you think better of it. Instead, you leave the slice where it is. A tiny rebellion. Let the next wanderer find it and wonder. By morning word has already spread. Someone left a pineapple offering in the Hall of Eyes, a maid, whispers. They say it's symbolic. What's it mean, asks another. Sacrifice, or seduction, or maybe it's a trap. The pineapple panic has entered its postmodern phase, and so naturally the court responds with ritual. By midday, you find yourself back in the great hall where a new taster protocol is being demonstrated. A man in crimson livery titled the Royal Fruit Custodian explains the new safety measures. All pineapples must be visually inspected from a distance of 3 feet, he drones. No unapproved touching, no self-slicing. Consumption only in pairs, preferably with a witness of noble blood. You snort quietly. Somewhere, a harpsichord begins playing a melancholy tune, possibly titled L'ananas, une tragédie. And then someone introduces the golden forks. Yes, golden forks. New specially designed cutlery rumored to neutralize potential toxins through, well, no one really knows how. Alchemy, whispers the Duke of Loiret, with an air of scientific confidence that suggests he's never read a book in his life. The forks are long, thin, delicate things, each with a tiny pineapple etched into the handle. One noblewoman uses hers to poke at a gooseberry tart. Another insists on carrying hers in a custom-embroidered sleeve tucked into her corset. You never know when you'll be offered a slice, she explains gravely. Historians still argue whether these golden utensils were genuinely commissioned for safety or just another layer of edible theater. Some even suggest they were made of tin painted to gleam under candlelight. The truth, like most things in Versailles, is deliciously unclear. You're ushered into a tasting salon. Yes, these now exist, where 5 carefully vetted guests will experience pineapple under the strictest supervision. The fruit is rolled out under a velvet cover, then unveiled with great drama. Everyone gasps, even though they've seen 5 today already. The slices are prepared behind a screen to prevent visual contamination. When they arrive, they're perfumed with a mist of orange blossom and dabbed gently with linen cloths to remove emotional residue. You are not making this up. You couldn't if you tried. The guests chew slowly, eyes closed, as if composing love sonnets in their heads. One nods solemnly, another bursts into gentle tears. It's so rare, she whispers, even though the flavor is just pineapple. But you're starting to understand it's not about the taste. It's never been about the taste. Pineapple is an experience, a performance, a status symbol draped in sugar. You excuse yourself and step out onto the terrace. The gardens stretch before you, symmetrical and serene, lit by soft afternoon sun and 1,000 whispered judgments. A gardener passes pushing a wheelbarrow of pineapple crowns destined for compost. Never thought I'd see the day, he mutters. Fruit treated better than people. You nod. Back in the hall, someone is drawing up a list of those permitted to speak during pineapple tastings. A registry of tongues, they're calling it. You don't ask. You find yourself wondering what the peasants outside Versailles think of all this. Then you remember they don't know. Or if they do, they probably think it's a lie. Who would believe it? That nobles spend fortunes renting inedible fruit. That meals come with custom forks and licensed sniffers. That reputations rise and fall based on whether you peeled your pineapple clockwise. And yet here you are, watching as the court announces a new role, pineapple archivist. Their job: cataloging every pineapple that enters Versailles, its weight, origin, viewing hours, and suspected emotional impact. There's even talk of printing a gazette, a sort of fruit society column. This week's most admired rind, one early draft, reads, "Spotted the Marquise de Nîmes fanning herself with the dried pineapple crown très audacieux. You don't laugh. Not anymore. Because somewhere along the way, this whole absurd ritual has become normal. And if you're being honest, it's kind of comforting." The next morning begins with a cordial. Pineapple obviously diluted with lavender and served in a crystal thimble. It's less of a drink and more of a suggestion. You sip not because you're thirsty, but because someone's watching, and at Versailles, everything is performative. You wander into the Salon du Matin, where nobles gather to exchange polite insults over pastries. Today, though, the mood is hushed. Something new has emerged. Suspicion. Not the familiar suspicion about poison, no. That's old hat by now. This is something subtler. A new rumor just taking root, whispered between yawns and sugar cubes. They're saying pineapple might be too sweet. A nobleman in mauve leans close and taps your shoulder with a gloved finger. "It's unnatural," he murmurs, like a kiss from someone who wants something. You blink, unsure if he's talking about fruit or politics. Apparently someone no one remembers who has floated the idea that pineapples are suspiciously enjoyable, that their intense sweetness, their tropical aroma, their golden glistening flesh might be a little too perfect. And you know what perfect things mean at Versailles deception. Sugar, once a rare luxury, is now increasingly accessible, and with it comes unease. It's not just a culinary change, it's a social one. When peasants start putting honey in their tea and jam on their bread, nobles have to find a new flavor frontier. Pineapple, once the apex of indulgence, is now teetering on the edge of vulgarity. You overhear two ladies debating whether to cancel pineapple at an upcoming salon. I don't trust food that doesn't require chewing one's sniffs. It slides down the throat like a secret. The other nods, and it lingers, like betrayal. You glance at the half-eaten pineapple tart on her plate. Hypocrisy is always served chilled. Historians still argue whether the suspicion of pineapple sweetness was driven by actual taste preferences or by anxieties about class boundaries. As exotic goods became more available, the aristocracy grew paranoid, not of losing wealth, but of losing uniqueness. If everyone could enjoy a pineapple, what was the point? So now they invent new fears. You sit in on a lecture. Yes, an actual lecture hosted by a minor viscount who styles himself a culinary philosopher. He stands before an easel with diagrams showing the levels of sweetness and their corresponding effects on the human psyche. Below a threshold, he intones, "Sweetness is innocent." Beyond it, manipulation. He draws a line labeled pineapple. The room gasps. Later at a luncheon, you notice no one touches the pineapple glaze. One guest even requests vinegar dressing for her fruit. Sharpness shows restraint, she says. Sweetness tempts the weak. This, you realize, is Versailles in microcosm. The fruit that once symbolized luxury now risks being seen as common. Sweetness once desired now implies naivety, overindulgence, a lack of taste. You pass a hallway where a maid is removing pineapple-themed wallpaper. Orders of the Duchesse, she shrugs. She says it's passé. You linger to watch. Outside in the private gardens, you find the Countess de Malin reclining beneath a pergola. She's peeling grapes, an old-fashioned pastime, while a pineapple sits untouched beside her. She notices your glance. It's too eager, she says, too colorful. I don't trust anything that doesn't have the decency to look dull. You nod and she offers you a grape. You take it. It tastes boring, safely boring. By now the shift is unmistakable. Nobles who once flaunted their pineapples now hide them like embarrassing childhood toys. One man claims to be detoxing from tropicals. Another says he only consumes indigenous fruits, now pears, apples, and things that fall properly from trees. You find yourself back at the fruit salon that evening, where a new dish is making waves deconstructed pineapple essence. It contains no actual pineapple, just a faint trace of aroma infused into a cube of steamed milk and disappointment. People rave about it, so subtle they whisper. So conceptual, you want to scream. Instead, you drift to the edge of the room where a young noblewoman is writing in her journal. She lets you peek. One page is filled with sketches of pineapple slices, each labeled with emotions. Slice 1, anticipation. Slice 2, denial. Slice 3, regret. You close the journal gently. You understand now. Pineapple has entered its melancholy phase. Historians still argue about the exact moment when the fruit fell out of aristocratic favor. Some cite a specific dinner where a guest spit out a too-ripe slice. Others say it was when a merchant started selling imported preserves to the middle class. But the signs are everywhere. You walk past a mirror and catch your reflection powdered poised and somehow bored. Pineapple no longer surprises. It's expected. And in Versailles, expected things are already dead. You spend the next few days floating through the corridors of Versailles like a leaf caught in a perfumed breeze, watching as the pineapple, once lauded, adored, nearly worshipped, transforms into something fraught. A status symbol teetering on the edge of satire. But you're not prepared for what comes next. A trial. Yes, a real trial. Word spreads like whipped egg whites a marquis has been accused of murder. The weapon, a candied pineapple. You arrive early to secure a good seat. It's held in one of the grand salons, not a courtroom, but who can tell the difference here? The chairs are velvet. The air is thick with powdered anticipation. The accused Marquis de Rochechouart, known mostly for his elaborate cravats and peculiar habit of humming mid-sentence. The victim, a minor viscount, collapsed dramatically after receiving a sugared pineapple gift in a crystal box tied with saffron ribbon. Was it poison or just indigestion? Historians still argue whether the viscount actually died at all. Some say he revived an hour later, demanded a pastry, and promptly fainted again. Others claim he remains unconscious to this day, muttering, too sweet, in his sleep. The Marquis insists he did nothing wrong. It was a gesture of friendship, he protests, waving a perfumed handkerchief. A little candied luxury for a gentleman of taste. But why pineapple, the prosecutor presses Payson dramatically. You could have chosen quince, pear, even plum. The Marquis shrugs helplessly. Because pineapple speaks, gasps. The chamber rustles with barely restrained glee. You can practically see the gossip writing itself into the next salon pamphlet, Murder by Marmalade, the exotic fruit scandal of the season. A so-called expert is brought in to testify. He wears pince-nez, carries a satchel of dried herbs, and refers to himself as a taste pathologist. He claims pineapple, when boiled in sugar for more than 7 minutes, releases emotional toxins. The tongue, he says, gravely remembers betrayal. You stifle a giggle. No one else does. The court is enthralled. In the front row, a countess fans herself vigorously. Behind her, a young dandy sketches the Marquis in profile, labeling the drawing L'assassin à l'ananas. Someone's already composing a minuet about the affair. The Marquise's defense rests entirely on the principle of intent. Would a man truly inclined to poison his lawyer plead select a fruit so famously beautiful? It's not a bad argument, and by Versailles standards, it might even work. You step outside during a recess and find the court's pastry chef standing nearby, arms crossed. It wasn't poison, he mutters. It was a bad batch of citron. Too much rind, bitter as lies. But the damage is done. The pineapple has now become dangerous. Not just suspicious or overly sweet, but potentially lethal. The trial drags on for 3 days. In that time, several salons host taste-testing reenactments with dramatic readings of the Marquise's letter and performances where pineapples are rolled across tables like grenades. At one soiree, someone builds an entire diorama of the courtroom using sugar figurines. The pineapple is life-sized and glows from within. Eventually, the court reaches a decision the Marquis is innocent, but only barely. He's advised to refrain from gifting fruit for at least a year. His pineapple privileges are formally revoked. A new term enters the gossip lexicon: ananas, interdit, the forbidden pineapple. You return to your chambers that evening feeling oddly triumphant. The scandal has given the court something new to chew on. Pineapple has gained a sinister edge. It's no longer a mere indulgence, it's an act of rebellion. You stare at your own untouched slice, now browning slightly on a porcelain dish. It looks innocent enough, glistening, aromatic. But beneath that sugary sheen lies power real or imagined. It doesn't matter anymore. Belief in Versailles is reality. That night, the court hosts a masquerade. You enter the grand ballroom dressed like many others in full fruit regalia. Grapes trail from your shoulders. Your mask is carved from papier-mâché and painted gold. It's supposed to be a lemon. Everyone keeps calling it a pineapple. You don't correct them. At midnight, a figure enters dressed entirely as a pineapple. Full-body costume, green fronds rising from their powdered wig, gold sequins stitched into every crevice. They dance slowly, silently with whoever dares. No one knows who it is. Rumors abound. Some say it's the king. Others insist it's the Marquis himself, back from disgrace. One lady claims it's not a person at all, just the spirit of fruit risen from ridicule. You don't dance. You watch. And in the quiet corners of the room, the laughter begins to soften. The jokes slow. The pineapple, it seems, has started to haunt them, not because it's deadly, but because it's everywhere, ubiquitous, inevitable, and they know deep down that the moment something is truly everywhere, it's over. By morning, the pineapple costume has disappeared along with 3 candelabras and a powdered spaniel named Pompon. The masquerade is declared a triumph. Everyone agrees it was tasteful, exotic, and just scandalous enough. But beneath the hangovers and smeared rouge, something has shifted. You feel at first in the air a subtle cooling of enthusiasm. No one says they're tired of pineapple. That would be vulgar. But actions speak. At breakfast, the fruit is notably absent. In its place, figs, dates, even a few daring slices of blood orange. No ceremony, no golden forks, just fruit, served, eaten, forgotten. You wander the halls unsure what to do with your hands, your appetite, your expectations. And then you hear it. Music. You follow the sound into a sun-drenched salon where a string quartet plays a new piece, something slow, solemn, slightly ridiculous. The sheet music reads, Concerto en Ananas Majeur. At the center of the room, a display table has been erected. Upon it sits a single pineapple, real, fresh, unsliced. But this one is different. It has an entourage. On either side, delicate dishes carry miniature strawberries perched on swans sculpted from marzipan. There's a bowl of cherries nestled in a cradle of spun sugar. A mango scandalously ripe leans suggestively against a silver goblet. This is not a fruit plate. This is theater. And the pineapple. It's the star that no longer shows up to rehearsal. A footman approaches. The Duchess would like to invite you to witness La Procession du Fruit, he whispers, as if delivering intelligence from a war front. You follow. The next room has been cleared, transformed into a ceremonial path. The walls draped in silk, the floor scattered with lavender and mint. At the far end, a tiny wheeled chariot pulled by 4 elaborately groomed dogs. Inside the chariot, a pineapple wearing a tiny velvet crown. Yes, really. A trumpet sounds a single mournful note, and the procession begins. Nobles line the route, applauding politely as the pineapple is rolled past them. Some bow. One weeps. You stand very still, hands folded, watching the absurdity glide by. This, you realize, is fruit theatrics at its peak. Pineapple has been fully deified. And yet, like all cults, the devotion is showing cracks. You notice fewer sketches in the margins of journals. Pineapple-themed fashion has dwindled now, limited to cufflinks and faint embroidery. One lady wears an entirely neutral gown. When asked why, she shrugs. Seasonal fatigue. You stroll past the garden pavilions and hear two cooks discussing new designs for the dessert table. What about a kiwi pyramid, one suggests. Too pedestrian, says the other. Maybe a cherry chandelier. No one mentions pineapple. Historians still argue whether this cooling of interest was a conscious decision or simply the result of oversaturation. The fruit had reached heights so ridiculous it was bound to fall, like a soufflé left too long in Versailles air. You pause beside a statue of Minerva. At her marble feet, someone has placed a single pineapple ring on a lace doily. A note beside it reads, "For wisdom or indigestion." You chuckle. As you walk back toward the palace, you spot a child, barefoot, servant class, no wig, chasing a rolling pineapple down the slope. He catches it, laughs, bites into it without hesitation. No silver fork, no fanfare, just juice and joy. And for a moment, you envy him. Back inside, a few brave nobles are trying to reclaim the fruit's mystique. One organizes a blind tasting. Which is pineapple and which is scented melon, he challenges. No one gets it right. Another hosts a symposium titled The Aesthetic Ethics of Tropical Produce. You fall asleep halfway through. Someone else introduces pineapple-scented candles. For ambiance, she says. They smell vaguely of sugar and regret. But it's clear the magic has faded. The cult is losing followers. And then just when you think you've seen it all, a new trend emerges. You're invited to a midnight gathering, small, exclusive hush-hush. Bring no fruit, the invitation warns. Inside, nobles recline on cushions. Soft lute music plays. There are no pineapples, none. Just bowls of grapes, plain bread, glasses of spring water. The host rises. This, he says, gesturing to the bare table, is a feast of simplicity. A ripple of nervous laughter moves through the room. But no one leaves, because secretly they're relieved. They're tired of spectacle, of symbolism, of the pressure to pretend. Tonight they just want to chew something without consequence. You nibble on a crust of bread and taste something you haven't in weeks. Peace. The next morning greets you with gray skies and the kind of damp that seeps into powdered wigs and satin cuffs alike. Versailles feels heavier somehow. Less like a gilded cage, more like a stage set that forgot its lines. You wander down to the breakfast salon, expecting the usual spread, layered tarts, sweetmeats, bowls of sugared fruit, but today there's porridge. Just porridge. Thick, lumpy, unapologetic. A young footman stares mournfully at it, ladling oats into delicate china. The Duchess says pineapple overstimulates the liver, he mutters. We're on a cleansing rotation now. You nod solemnly, then lean in. Are there any slices left? He hesitates. One. In the cellar, under lock. You think better of asking. Instead, you stroll toward the orangery. The citrus trees seem smug today, their fruit glowing a quiet orange like they've outlived a rival. And maybe they have. As you pass a row of lemon bushes, you overhear two noblemen whispering about a troubling pamphlet that's begun circulating. Colonial produce and the corruption of the French spirit. You stop. Listen. Apparently someone anonymous, of course, has written a screed arguing that pineapples and other foreign indulgences have weakened the moral fiber of the aristocracy. That their obsession with tropical fruits reflects a deeper rot dependence on exotic imports, distraction from national duties, and above all, susceptibility to temptation. The word decadence appears more than once. You feel a breeze. It's not just the pineapple that's under attack now, it's what it represents. Luxury without purpose, abundance without gratitude, sweetness without substance. Historians still argue whether the pamphlet came from a rival noble faction or was planted by early revolutionaries testing the waters. Either way, the court feels it. Suddenly, there's talk of moral fruit. Figs are making a comeback, humble biblical French. Apples too, though someone warns they're a bit Protestant. Pineapple quietly removed. You walk into a salon where not 2 weeks ago a pineapple had its own chaise lounge. Now a pot of thyme sits in its place. It smells earthy, grounded, a little bit sad. The hostess smiles tightly. I find herbs more contemplative. You nod. No one mentions the change. In the main hall, a new mural is being unveiled. Commissioned before the shift, it features cherubs frolicking around an enormous pineapple. You watch as the crowd murmurs uneasily. Someone coughs. Someone else points out a suspicious crack in the plaster. The mural is covered by noon. You catch up with the Marquise de Lille, once known for her pineapple shoes, now seen plucking petals from violets. She sighs. It turned on us, didn't it, the fruit? Or we turned on it. You want to ask her what changed, but you already know. Pineapple was never just about fruit. It was about power over nature, over novelty, over taste. And when that power slipped, when others began growing it, selling it, understanding it, it stopped being special. It became a mirror. And no one at Versailles likes what they see in mirrors lately. You pass a pastry chef burning old pineapple molds in a copper basin. New orders, he shrugs. Simple shapes, circles, rectangles, French. Later that day, you walk into a lecture on agricultural patriotism. A minor noble gives a talk on the virtues of regional vegetables. The turnip, he says, is an emblem of resilience. You doodle a pineapple wearing a crown in the margins of your notes and feel vaguely treasonous. There's a growing fear now, a soft, sour tension. Not just about pineapples, but what they herald. Imports, indulgences, irrelevance. One courtier muses that pineapple fever was a kind of disease, a tropical delirium, he says. It clouded our judgment. You think back to the glass cases, the serenades, the golden forks, the pineapple parades, and you wonder, were they ever really about admiration, or were they a distraction? A golden wedge of denial in a crumbling world. Even the gardeners seem to know it's over. You pass the old piniere, once fiercely guarded, now abandoned. Inside, a single withered pineapple plant sits in silence, its leaves drooping like exhausted dancers after the final bow. You linger at the door. A small sign remains nailed to the frame. Please do not touch the fruit. It may still be dreaming. You close the door gently behind you, because dreams, however sweet, must eventually give way to morning. Afternoon sun falls unevenly across the palace floor, catching in the grooves between parquet tiles and warming the hem of your coat as you stroll unhurried, uncertain toward the west wing. The hush in the halls isn't the reverent quiet of protocol. It's heavier than that. You feel it in the way footmen no longer glide but shuffle, in the fact that today, not one wig has feathers. Something is ending. You're summoned to the private greenhouse of the Comtesse de Villeneuve, a quiet figure, known more for her rare orchids than her politics. She's allowed very few inside her prized glasshouse. The invitation reads simply, "Come before the dusk. The last pineapple is blooming." You arrive just as the light begins to soften, slipping amber over panes of bubbled glass. The room is warm, fragrant, impossibly still. Inside the pineapple plant, it's stunning. Not because it's grand, it isn't. It's small, compact, awkward even. Its fruit leans slightly to one side, imperfect and uneven in color. It doesn't gleam. It doesn't sparkle. It just is. The Comtesse approaches quietly, wearing gloves of pale green netting and a shawl that smells faintly of rosemary. I've whispered to it every morning, she says, not looking at you. Not because I expected it to grow faster, just so it wouldn't be lonely. You nod instinctively softer in your breathing. The whole space feels like a chapel. She leads you around the pot. On the far side, tucked beneath a leaf, hangs a small paper tag. It reads, Clément. The fruit needed a name, she explains, gently brushing dust from the tag. Everything here has a name, even the beetles. You want to laugh, but the moment won't let you. Clément. The pineapple, grown over 2 years in painstaking silence, warmth, and total devotion. The Comtesse didn't grow him for parties or posturing. She grew him because, well, perhaps she needed something to care for that wouldn't ask questions or betray her. Historians still argue whether the greenhouses of Versailles were places of prestige or retreat. For some nobles like the Comtesse, they became sanctuaries, a counterbalance to the exhausting theater of court life. While others competed for size and sweetness, she grew hers quietly, privately, without spectacle. She plucks a dead leaf from Clément's base, tosses it into a copper bin. They're all trying to forget him now, she says. The fruit. What he meant. But I think we need to remember. You ask her what she'll do when he's ripe. I won't eat him, she says, almost scandalized. I'll let him rest, then return him to the soil. Maybe grow another. You smile. That evening you stroll alone through the outer gardens, your thoughts lingering on the Comtesse and her fruit. You pass an abandoned fruit display, dust coating the silver trays. One has a half-melted wax pineapple left behind like a prop from a forgotten play. At the reflecting pool, 2 young girls in plain muslin dresses float paper boats. One is painted yellow. It's a pineapple boat, the younger says to you. We're sending it away. You nod. Where to? She shrugs. Back where it came from. From across the gravel path, an old gardener tips his hat. Used to grow 'em myself, he says, before the fancy folks got bored. He crouches, pulling weeds from the base of a fig tree. It was never about the fruit, he mutters. It was about who could afford to pretend it meant something. You help him tie up a trellis vine. The rhythm of it feels grounding. He doesn't ask your name. You don't offer it. Out here, identity doesn't matter so much. Only the soil, the seasons. The Comtesse's words repeat in your mind. We need to remember. You start to think about what the pineapple craze left behind. A trail of empty cases, forgotten paintings, spoiled jars of jam, but also stories, songs, recipes that will linger in secret kitchens, wigs that may never fully shed their golden fruit pins, laughter that still echoes in certain salons if you're quiet enough. It's easy to mock Versailles for its extravagance, its absurdity. But beneath the layers of lace and syrup and powdered airs, you find something else. Longing, for meaning, for attention, for a moment of beauty in a world where power always seemed to slip through jeweled fingers. As you head back inside, you pass the conservatory one last time. Clément rests peacefully under his dome, the Comtesse seated beside him knitting. She doesn't look up, but you raise a hand anyway. Not goodbye, just acknowledgement. In a palace built for kings tonight, the quiet corners hold the only truths worth tending. The following day, Versailles rises to the sound of polite scandal. Two noblemen, Count Lagrivière and the Baron de Montpreux, have apparently entered into a horticultural rivalry. Not over roses, not over orchids, not even over sculpted hedges, over pineapples. Again. You nearly choke on your morning pear. You see, even as the court attempts to distance itself from the pineapple's decline, a few souls cling stubbornly to its fading glow. And like moths to a gilded flame, these two gentlemen have rekindled the most delicate of competitions who can grow the juiciest, most symmetrical, most emotionally affecting pineapple in France. It's tragic, really. They each claim heritage rights to the true colonial strain, as if the pineapple is a noble bloodline. They've employed rival botanists, imported rare compost materials, ground antelope horn for one, powdered lapis for the other, and even enlisted musicians to play concertos in their greenhouses. You must serenade the sapling, the Baron insists. Otherwise, it sulks. You visit Lagrivière's pinière first. Its surprisingly militaristic rows of pineapples at attention, each plant numbered, trimmed, and supported by a gilded stake. Gardeners move among them like palace guards. He shows you his current champion, a glossy, faintly golden specimen he calls Étoile. He gestures dramatically. She listens only to Vivaldi. You pretend to nod wisely. Later at Montpreux's estate, the vibe shifts entirely. His greenhouse is humid, overgrown, almost chaotic. Pineapple vines tangle among banana trees and wandering jasmine. I prefer an emotional growing environment, he says, waving incense over a particularly moody fruit named Celestine. A maid offers you pineapple tea. You accept with trepidation. The two men haven't spoken in weeks. Their feud has become so baroque, it has its own steward whose sole job is to document insults, relay sarcastic compliments, and ensure each man's pineapples remain untouched by the other. Historians still argue whether this particular horticultural arms race ever produced a fruit of notable quality. Some suggest the rivalry pushed both men to near bankruptcy. Others claim one of them actually tried to sabotage the other's soil with salt and powdered mint. At court, bets are already being placed. The Duchesse de Fontainebleau favors Lagrivière. His pineapples are symmetrical, she declares. Symmetry is next to divinity. Meanwhile, the Chevalier de Vire backs Montpreux. A pineapple must taste like poetry, not a geometry lesson. One evening, you're invited to a pineapple preview, a velvet-curtained salon hushed as a tomb. Inside, the two contestants standing stiffly on opposite sides of the room. Between them, their fruits, Étoile and Celestine, rest on silk pillows. No one touches them. Of course not. They're sniffed, admired, praised with carefully ambiguous language. Full-bodied, someone murmurs. Firm yet introspective, says another. The crowd stirs as a tiny bell rings. The judging begins. A panel of three dowagers leans in, squinting at the leaves. One produces a jeweler's loupe. Another sniffs the base of Celestine with a grave expression. Then drama. The final judge, Madame de Rieux, feared and revered for her palate, declares she will taste one. A gasp ripples through the salon. Both men look ready to faint. She lifts a knife gold naturally and slices a thin sliver from Étoile. Pauses. Places it on her tongue. The silence is cathedral-like. She chews. Slowly. Thoughtfully. Then meme. The room exhales. It's not a win. It's not a loss. It's a syllable that maintains balance. The next day, the duel resumes. La Grivière is seen feeding his pineapple mineral water laced with violet essence. Montpreux orders a marble bench installed for his fruits to contemplate existence. You begin to wonder if this is less about winning and more about having a reason to care again. Something to nurture, to obsess over, to distract from the shifting winds outside the palace walls. Because the world is changing, and somewhere beneath all this, beneath the powdered wigs and perfumed banter, is the creeping sense that this glittering stage might not last forever. You walk the gardens alone that evening past the mossy statues and the reflecting pool where frogs croak indifferently at fashion's fall. There, tucked behind a hedge, you spot a boy, one of the palace's page boys, gently planting a tiny pineapple sprout in a clay pot. No fuss, no name, no velvet. You crouch beside him. Why a pineapple, you ask? He shrugs. I like the leaves. You smile. In that moment, it's clearer than ever. While nobles duel with compost and metaphor, the fruit has quietly slipped out of their control. It belongs now to anyone with soil patience and curiosity. Not bad for something once feared more than poison. The next few days unfold with the rhythm of a sigh. Versailles seems to be exhaling, loosening its corset stays, letting the tension trickle out with each passing moment. The pineapple duel fades from conversation, not because it's resolved, but because everyone simply gets tired of pretending to care. You overhear the Duchesse de Montenoy declare she's on a sabbatical from symbolism, whatever that means. Meanwhile, the fruit displays in the dining salons become sparse. A few pomegranates here, a demure line of plums there. Nothing golden, nothing spiky, just honest, quiet produce. And in their absence, something else creeps in. Fear. Not the old theatrical kind, poison in the pie fear or scandal at the supper fear. No. This is a new flavor. A hushed murmur, a shared glance, a skipped dessert. Because pineapples are arriving again. But this time, they're cheap. It starts with a merchant, clever, wrinkled provincial who begins selling imported pineapples at the Parisian markets for a fraction of their former glory price. He has no velvet display case, just a cart, a sign, ananas fraise, pour tous, and they sell. To tailors, bakers, laundresses, anyone who can scrounge a few coins. At first, Versailles dismisses it. They're surely inferior, says the Marquise de Tournelle. Dusty, watered down. But you sneak off to the market one morning, hood-drawn, coat unpowdered, and you try one. It's perfect, juicy, sweet, tangy at the end. You close your eyes and chew slowly, letting the flavor contradict everything you've been told. And as you wander back through the narrow lanes outside the palace gates, you see the ripple effect taking hold. Fruit stands with bundles of pineapple slices, a bakery offering tarte à l'ananas, children with sticky fingers. The spell is broken. Back at Versailles, panic brews under the surface. Nobles pretend not to notice, but they're noticing. How can they not? The once exclusive fruit now rides in straw baskets on donkey carts. It shows up in peasant kitchens, stuffed in bread rolls and boiled into rustic jams. No fans, no golden forks. Just a knife, a plate of bite. You attend a salon where the Comte d'Argenteuil tries to reassert the fruit's status with a dramatic pineapple reverence ceremony. There's chanting, a poem, even a handbell. No one comes. In the far corner, the younger nobles are passing around slices of apple, with no irony, just appetite. You lean against the wall, watching as pineapples, real ones once so adored, sit untouched on side tables, browning softly in the candlelight. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the official downfall of the pineapple craze or merely its devaluation. Either way, the symbolism shifts. No longer the crown jewel, the pineapple has become a relic, not forgotten, but no longer feared. You walk past the ballroom that once hosted the pineapple masquerade. Now it echoes with more mundane chatter taxes, inheritance, rainfall. Someone's playing a card game called Pass the Pineapple, in which the goal is to avoid being left with the fruit. You watch around. It ends with laughter. The loser fans himself in mock horror. "I've been pineappled," he cries. You shake your head. The nobility, you realize, will always find a way to turn their humiliation into theater. Outside, the gardens wear the season differently now. Less preening, less polish. The fig trees bloom quietly. The quince trees are full. Someone's planted beans. You're told a count did it as an experiment in rustic honesty. His neighbors mocked him until their cooks asked for beans too. Even the piniers are changing. Once guarded like royal nurseries, now some stand open doors, unlatched glass, fogged with neglect. One has been converted into a reading room, another into a coop for particularly well-behaved chickens. You pause by the last one and watch a gardener carry out a single pineapple, overripe, sun-faded, but still intact. He lays it on the stone wall near the path, gives it a pat. "Won't toss it," he mutters. "Too many stories?" You nod, because that's what's left now. Not fashion, not scandal, not symbolism, just stories. You return to your chambers and find a note tucked into your mirror frame. It's from the Comtesse de Villeneuve. "Clément has withered. I buried him beside the lemon tree. Thank you for visiting him before the end." You close your eyes and picture it, the grave small, the soil soft, a few rosemary sprigs planted nearby. A fruit once worshipped, now resting in dirt. And somehow that feels right. Because fruit, like favor, like fashion, like Versailles itself, was never meant to last forever. Dinner that evening is noticeably quieter. You arrive to find a long table already half filled with subdued nobles, their usual vibrancy dulled like silver left too long in the open air. No powdered footmen announcing arrivals, no fans fluttering like birds mid-gossip. The seats aren't as full as usual. Some of the regulars are absent out in the provinces, perhaps, or simply tired of performing. The centerpiece tonight is a humble arrangement of autumn herbs, thyme, sage, maybe a few sprigs of lavender. The pineapple has vanished, not just from the table, but from the room, from the conversation. And in its place, something far more dangerous. Silence. Because as you settle into your velvet chair, you hear murmurs, not of fruit or flavor, but of letters intercepted, of rising unrest of bread, riots flickering like candle flames in the streets of Paris. No one speaks openly yet. Not quite. But the air is shifting. The palace, once giddy with absurdity, now feels bloated, tired. There's a faint hum of tension beneath the surface, like a teacup, cracked just enough to whisper that it won't survive another pour. You take a sip of watered wine and listen to the forks clinking nervously against porcelain, to the servants quieter now, quicker, to the older nobles glancing toward the windows more often than toward the food. At the far end of the table, someone dares a joke about pineapple. "Remember when the Baron fainted over a bruised slice," he says. A smattering of polite chuckles follows. Then, silence again. Because no one wants to remember the days of fruit worship now. Not while smoke rises faintly from the far edge of the horizon. Not while the bakeries near the gates are being looted. Not when whispers of a people's army are becoming less poetic and more present. Historians still argue whether the court knew the revolution was coming or if they simply sensed that something was about to crack. But anyone with half a sense could feel it in the hallways. The laughter was thinner, the banquets shorter, the wine less sweet. You step out into the corridor after the meal and find yourself alone. A rarity. The hall is lit by only a few sconces now. Candle budgets have been quietly slashed. Even luxury trims itself when it starts to feel hunted. You wander toward the old display room where once the pineapples were kept under glass like reliquaries. The room is open now, empty. Just a faint outline where a glass dome once sat, a circular stain in the wood where fruit sweat marked territory. You sit on the windowsill feeling the chill settle into your collarbones and stare out across the darkening lawn. The wind carries a different scent now. Not roses, not sugar, smoke, horse sweat, damp wool. You remember the first pineapple you saw here, gilded, guarded, worshipped. You remember the marquis with the golden fork. The taster who sniffed each slice like it might confess a secret. You remember Clément, and the gardener who called the fruit lonely. So much ceremony. And now, a revolution simmers outside the gates, and inside nobles sip their wine like condemned men, sipping the last of the bottle, pretending not to notice that the cork was already popped days ago. You head toward the library. Inside, a handful of younger nobles gather in whispers. One is reading aloud from a pamphlet something about liberty. Another is tracing maps of Paris, measuring distance from the Bastille to the Royal Bakery. No one mentions pineapple, and yet you can't help but feel its presence, not in flavor but in memory, in what it once symbolized. Excess, elegance, obsession, detachment. A fruit so elevated that the mere act of biting into it once meant scandal and now means nothing at all. You pull a forgotten book from the shelf and open it. Inside, tucked like a pressed flower, is a sketch, delicate lines on rough paper. A pineapple slightly tilted wearing a small crown. Someone cared enough to hide it, to preserve a piece of the absurdity. You slip it into your coat. It's nearly midnight when you return to your quarters. Outside your window, you see torches flickering near the trees. Not court torches. Not decorative. Real ones. Carried by real hands. Hands not interested in tropical fruit or gold-plated forks. You blow out your candle and sit in the dark, listening. Far away, someone sings. Not a court tune. A worker's chant. Low, repetitive, determined. And for the first time, you understand what's been looming beneath the pineapple's rise and fall all along. It wasn't just a fruit. It was a distraction. A crown-shaped blindfold worn by a class drifting steadily toward the edge. Now the blindfolds are slipping. And outside in the dark, the people are hungry, but not for fruit. For something real. The next morning breaks not with sunlight, but with fog. A thick gray breath pressed gently against the windows of Versailles. It dulls. The golden trim softens the carvings, mutes the whisper of fabric through corridors. You rise slowly, your limbs heavy, your thoughts quieter than usual. You dress simply. No lace, no embroidery, no powdered wig. It feels like a choice. Word moves faster now, carried not by servants but by silence. Everyone hears it at once. The gates were breached during the night. Not fully. Not with fire or fury. Just opened. Someone left them ajar. A message. A warning. At breakfast, no one eats. The table is set. Of course, habit is stronger than hunger, but the food is untouched. A plate of sliced apples turns brown at the edges. A pitcher of milk sweats quietly onto the linen. Someone's arranged 3 figs into a triangle and stabbed a knife into the center. It doesn't mean anything, but it feels symbolic. You walk slowly to the salon where it all began, where pineapples once held court, where nobles paraded their rented fruit like armor. The room is quiet now, bare. The only sound is the creak of the floor under your feet. A single pineapple remains. Not real, not wax. Paper. Folded. It sits on a side table, carefully creased, delicately inked hollow inside. Someone made it recently. Someone who remembered. You pick it up, feel its fragility in your palm. It weighs nothing, and still it holds everything. The sounds of Versailles today are different footfalls echo faster, no longer practiced. Doors are shut more firmly. A carriage rolls over gravel without pretense. The kitchen, once clanging with copper and laughter, now smells of broth, and not much else. Outside, you hear distant voices. Not angry, not yet, but firm. You slip through a side passage toward the orchard. The trees are blooming stubbornly unaware. A servant passes with a basket of onions and doesn't look up. Another one. Someone you've never noticed before hums under their breath a lullaby you can't quite place. You pause at the old piniere. Inside, it's quiet, humid, empty. All the pineapple plants are gone. In their place, pots of rosemary time 2 small peach trees. A clay marker stuck into the soil reads, "Something useful." You step back and let the door close gently behind you. There's no ceremony today. No dancing, no duels. Just a slow unraveling. In the corridors, portraits are being taken down, too opulent, too boastful, too recently finished. One footman is rolling up a rug. Dust protection, he says, but you hear the lie in his tone. Even the peacocks in the garden have gone quiet. You cross paths with the Comtesse de Villeneuve near the chapel. She's dressed in gray, no gloves, hair unpowdered. She nods and for once says nothing. The absence of pleasantry feels kind. You sit on a bench and breathe. There was once a time when fruit was fearsome, when sweet things came with golden forks and side glances, when eating was political and status was served with syrup. But now you pull a small slice of pineapple from your coat pocket, one of the last packed in oilcloth days ago. It's gone soft, a little limp, but still fragrant. You don't eat it, you just hold it, because now it's not a snack or a symbol. It's a memory of ridiculousness, of theater, of beauty taken to its most useless extreme, and beneath all that of a longing for something real. You tuck the slice gently under the roots of the nearest fig tree. Press the soil down, wipe your hands, and stand. Because whatever comes next, whatever walks through the opened gates of Versailles, you know the pineapples won't stop it. They were never meant to. They only ever distracted from it. And maybe in their strange way they bought you a little time, a little sweetness before the bitter arrived. And now, as night returns to the edges of the story, the fog outside thickens again, soft as wool, slow as breath. The palace quiets further. The marble chilled the gilding dim, and all around you the echo of footsteps becomes less insistent, more like a fading lullaby. You sit in your chair, eyes half-lidded, watching the last of the light gather in the corners. Somewhere far off, the rustle of rosemary, the creak of an old gate, and the sound of a breeze slipping through citrus trees, sounds no one at court would have noticed once, but that now feels sacred. Grounding. You breathe in slowly, out again. Maybe you still see the glass dome, the pineapple beneath it, the way it gleamed like it knew something no one else did. Maybe you remember Clément and the quiet care of the Comtesse, the scent of rose water, the crunch of sugar, the absurdity of the golden fork. All of it gently distant now, all of it softening. You drift there among the laughter that once filled salons and the strange hush that came after, among forgotten fruit and remembered names, among people who mistook sweetness for safety and beauty for permanence. And as the palace fades into shadow and the echo of the last absurd dinner dies away, you rest easy. Because this story, for all its oddity and opulence, was never about a fruit. It was about a world that wanted to matter, and about you floating quietly through it, letting the sweetness slip past without needing to bite. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.